Recording in progress.
I will call the meeting of the New Glarus School District Board to order. Good evening, everyone. This is Monday, October 11th. And we have an agenda in front of us that I believe has been published in all of the appropriate places. Is that correct, Chris?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Roll call will show that every board member is present here at the high school. And so we will not be doing roll calls. We'll just be doing hand votes, and we'll do a recorded number based on the number of hands. And are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? Otherwise, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I move.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. Is there support?
Second.
Thank you, Larry. There's a motion and support to approve the agenda as presented. Any questions, comments? If not, then we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The motion is carried. I think I saw 7 hands go up. Anyway, every meeting's a little bit different on our voting because of whether or not everyone's here. Okay, we'll move right away then into introductions and presentations. And we have the New Glarus School District Continuous Improvement Growth Plan. Dr. Thayer.
Hopefully, I'm trying to share it. All right. So I am going to go through the district improvement plan, growth plan. And team, feel free to jump in. We wrote this as a team. It shouldn't be all that surprising. You've heard a lot of the language before, but there's also a bit of jargon because this basically is an internal document usually. So if you have questions, especially about anything, but especially about some of the jargon, let me know. So first of all, every year we have a continuous improvement or growth plan. We called it a continuous improvement plan. We called it a growth plan. We had different names for it over the years. We decided to just go back to the traditional continuous improvement and then put growth in parentheses plan. Every year when we write this, we put what the vision, the mission, the core values, and the strategic goals of the entire district are, just to keep those front and center. So those have been in place for several years now, so they should look very familiar. So as we get into our actual plan for the 21-22 school year, as we've talked about before, and we talked about a lot, mostly in the curriculum committee, is that this year we spent a lot of time during the end of spring of last year into the summer of this year, creating a theory of action. We really wanted to try to focus and say, what is really going to drive the improvement and close those achievement gaps that we continue to see and that we want to make sure that we are focused on. So our statement of belief is that as an organization, we believe all students are capable of achieving proficiency and being college ready. And if we continue using high quality instructional materials for tier 1 with a focus on essential learning outcomes and implement a systematic plan for tier 2 for struggling students, which uses data to identify who's struggling with specific essential learning outcomes and or GPA, provides high quality instruction focused on those ELOs or essential learning outcomes, regularly assess whether proficiency has been reached, then we will close those achievement gaps and struggling students will reach proficiency. So again, we talked a lot about this in the curriculum committee meeting, but not as much at the regular board. So we can definitely talk about that more as we go through this. And then we put down action steps to support that theory of action. And those are supporting our goals 1 and 4. So goal 1 is about college and career readiness, and goal 4 is around equity. So for all students. So our action steps are to create this theory of action, which we have now already accomplished, but at the time we were writing this, we wanted to make sure that was in there because that was a big new step for us. We've developed the 4K through 12 college and career readiness metrics, which again, you've seen this summer, and then we're going to be rolling those out. We already have to staff, but then start to measure using those metrics. Create a plan to gather data about access to tier 1 instruction in ELA and math to make sure that all students are having access to the high quality instruction in tier 1. Implement a systematic plan for learning walks during tier 1 instruction. And what learning walks are is that teachers go visit other teachers and learn from them. So they have an opportunity to go and learn and from their colleagues next door or down the hall. And see that high quality tier 1 instruction and see what components are being utilized and which ones aren't. So that we have done learning walks in the past, and we can talk a little bit more about that. It was through, it was called the Academic Literacy Project through CISA 2. So we've done several rounds of staff attending those. It's in small groups. So many of our staff have been trained, but we want to implement this across the entire district now. So that's a part of, again, improving that tier 1 instruction. Create common formative assessment warehouses for 4K through 12 and have a plan for collection of that common formative assessment data. So in other words, we keep talking about common formative assessments, but what are they? How do we know? Where is it? And then how do we actually look at that data? Develop and implement a tier 2 checklist, expectations for pre-K through 12. And again, we had already talked to the curriculum about that. And then develop a plan for all SLOs, which is and or department goals. So SLOs are student learning objectives. Those are what are required through our educator effectiveness system. So create a place where basically all of the goals that staff, whether in teams or as buildings, how it all ties to district goals and the theory of action. So in the past, educator effectiveness is every staff member has to create a goal for the year. And it's in educator effectiveness. They have to tell their supervisor how they're going to meet that goal, and then they have to monitor it through the year. But it's not always been tied back to the district goals, and it hasn't always been tied back to our theory of action. We aren't requiring that they are tied this year, but we are strongly recommending it. And on top of it, then we are creating a chart that basically everyone has to enter their goals in. So you can see across the district, all the different goals in the district. Third grade could look at second grade and fourth grade and see how those connect to them, which again is very different than what we've done in the past. So it's kind of taking our big district goals, our strategic plan goals that you have determined, and making sure that everything is tied back to that. And so even on that document, it has, here's the board goal, here's the district's theory of action, here's the goal of the building, and then how the idea is, and then each individual grade level or subject, how you tie into that from there. So with that, I'll turn it over to the team and ask them if they have anything else they want to add about any of these areas, and then turn it over for questions. I think part of this, as you're going through, you may say, like, haven't we done some of this before? And we have, but not nearly as tight. We've had parts of the tier 1, and we've had some learning walks. We've had some, again, they've been creating goals, but it's not nearly as tight as this is bringing it together with a clear focus and direction.
And I guess I would piggyback off that and say the cohesiveness or tightness of the plan has carried over basically into the day-to-day and month-to-month work of our meetings, our professional meetings and stuff like that. So it's, a lot of, at least for this year, for our meetings so far, have been a lot of rinse and repeat, focus back on this, where in the past, there was a lot of good things, but it was kind of more of like a to-do list. know, okay, we're gonna do this and we get this done and that's a good thing. And there's a lot of good things that were done, but this is like a top to bottom cohesive plan. And I think that the beauty of it too is the connectedness between the three buildings. Very, very similar message, very similar, you know, expectation, you know, all the way through. And so that has really helped as far as just working with staff and getting into the school year. Like, okay, you talk about laser focus, it's really like right there.
I think that piece that I mentioned about it being cohesive across three buildings has probably been the most bonding piece of all of it. It looks different, right? It looks different in a kindergarten classroom than it does in a fourth grade classroom, or then we get to seventh grade or on up into high school. But like the tier 2 type, it's the common language of how we're doing business. And it's not just, what we're talking about here is really about our academic progress. The same kinds of conversations are happening on our behavior side with PBIS and how we're translating tier 1 and tier 2 that way as well. So in fact, if you read Ike's Monday huddle, and he's summarizing chapter 3 of our Taking Action book, that was our staff meeting with middle school and elementary school this afternoon, and here was also working through that book. So it's just building common understanding and language that helps everybody to be on the same, we're all playing from the same book. So I think that's been pretty empowering. It also helps to make sure that we all are doing the same thing. It translates differently, but it's all the same plan.
And I think I would say as someone who like just switched from, you know, being in the classroom to now being in these conversations on this team, is that this plan, I think, provides really clear focus and purpose for all stakeholders. And I think, you know, like Laura just mentioned, if you at least spend the month of October reading Ike's huddles and get a clear understanding of chapter 3. So every staff member in the building right now is doing a book study on that Taking Action book. I think it will help provide another little picture into some of the work that you're seeing here in these action steps that are taking place.
We talked today, and Anthony mentioned this in our staff meeting. So it's called action steps, and in the book we're reading, they're about essential actions. It's things we're doing. It's not just what we're saying, or it's not just a checklist and done. It's action because it's repeated over and over. You never just quit, or you never just say, well, we're all done with that now. It's kind of like doing your dishes. You have to do dishes all the time, right? It's the same sort of thing. It's the action we're doing.
I think also at the beginning, when we were creating this, it was really hard for all of us because in the past, we've had a really long list and we've accomplished that really long list, but it gets fragmented the longer it gets. And so, and a little less focused, like, well, shouldn't this be in there? We might do that, but that's not really where we're honing and where we're focusing. And so it was good to it was really hard at first, but I think it was good to kind of get some of those things, like, no. If they happen, fine, but they're not our priority. Here's our top. So I'll stop there because that's the part around the theory of action. And there's a few other additional steps, but just stop and see if we have questions on that part.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Jessica?
The third thing listed on the action steps, the create, plan to gather data about access to tier 1. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah.
I'm curious about that because doesn't everybody have
Right.
access to that?
So this really is mostly about special ed.
Okay.
And so as we're trying to make sure that to close these gaps, our biggest gaps are with special ed and with socioeconomic steps.
Okay.
Students in those groups
Mhm.
tend not to be as successful as students not in those groups. And so part of that question is within special ed, do those students actually have access to the tier 1 instruction? Because there are times that students need to have within their individualized plan some other plan than that tier 1, but we're trying to push toward as many students as possible should be having access to that tier 1. It should be by far the exception to not have access than the norm.
Okay.
And so that's what that's about, is to make sure and measure so that we are very clear always on which students and why. And so that as a team, we have those conversations, so it's very, we all are very clear on which students have access and which students don't, and why it is, or how can we get closer to them.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I would just say that, that is not, that's not it's something that's uncommon just for New Glarus. I mean, that is something that's common in all schools. And so it's just been part of our laser focus is making sure that, and we often talk about all kids, right? I mean, I think that's up there at the top of this about all students are capable of achieving high levels of proficiency. So that means that all students have to have access to grade level material.
Okay. Thanks, Laura.
It doesn't always mean that they're all going to be 100% proficient, but they have to have access to the curriculum first.
That makes sense.
And looking at what supports are needed in order to.
Yeah, and then we also talk about, when we're talking about all kids, like all kids who are going to live independent lives on their own at someday, like there are going to be a small percentage of kids who are going to need supports all their lives that probably aren't always going to live it, but they still need access to the grade level curriculum. It doesn't mean that they're maybe going to all achieve it at the same level of understanding. Does that make sense to you?
Yep, it does.
Other questions, comments, and my daughter Amy would have been a really good example.
I was thinking about her as we were
She had
talking. I wasn't
access,
bringing it up.
but did she got a lot more than what people would normally think just talking to her, but was she proficient and everything? No, but at least she had access to it.
But the other part of that, Bill, is you don't always know what she did know either, because
Exactly.
sometimes she could, I'm not talking about just saying, but sometimes students, having the ability to access to share with you what's in, they may have been able to be a recipient and receive the instruction and the information. They can't always put forth
Right,
to
and
show
get it back
you
out.
what they've learned. Doesn't mean they have to have something in there.
Right.
Yeah,
And in a way that we can understand.
exactly.
As the other side.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments? From my own, I just think it's great that we have a strategic plan where we have areas of focus and prioritization. Because I've been involved in a number of organizations, and I'll just say the University of Wisconsin-Madison, when I served on a couple of boards there where they didn't have a strategic plan for various colleges there. And I always viewed that as a bit of a problem, because what were they focusing on? Everybody was just doing their own thing. And it's great that we as a school district have certain areas of priority focus, and very glad to see that. I always tend to think of this as goals, like we have goals and then tactics. But it's just great that we have this, so.
Yeah, and I would just say those additional action steps are, they're just like one per
Yep.
other area, but the additional action steps, again, Laura mentioned this, are around developing the whole learner, developing and implementing a PBIS Tier 1 checklist or expectations for pre-K through 12. Again, we've had PBIS for a long time, but to make it systematic so that we are sure and clear that we're doing that well. And then creating a universal Tier 1 plan for social emotional learning for 4K through 12. And then in regard to supporting staff as they learn and grow, staff collaboration, time and training to support that action. We talked a little bit about that earlier in the personnel and handbook committee. And then finally, on the providing high quality facilities, that we obviously are continuing to plan for those referendum projects with a focus on fostering academic. So that kind of rounds out our plan for this year.
Do you need action on this to include these, or just for information?
It's just information. Basically, at the board level, you approve the goals, and then
Right.
we bring these to you, take feedback, and it's never an end. There's always opportunities to tweak and improve this as well, but this is bringing it to you just so you know what our plan is. And as you can see, we've already been moving on some of these things. We actually wrote this summer and been tweaking along the way as we started the school year.
And Carrie, don't feel bad if you don't get all the acronyms right away, because there are some
There's a lot.
acronyms unique to education.
Yeah, no, I have the WASPA book
It
has,
takes a
Oh,
little
there
bit to get used to it.
has the page on it.
Okay, well, thank you. Any final comments by the board, questions?
The county is continuing the mental health and they added ACEs to their 3-year plan. FYI, I'm on the mental health committee. So I'll let you guys know if there's things that are coming along. They're talking, we're just now starting the plans of what we're going to try and do going forward. So
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that presentation. Next, we'll move into the public comment period. And I don't see any member of the public in the room, so we don't have any requests for comment from within the room. And as I look at those who are participating by video, I'm not suspecting there are any requests to do a presentation, but if anybody who's joined us by video, and I guess that would just be Mary Ann, my wife. And I don't think she's planning to request to present, and if I'm wrong, Mary Ann, just put your hand up, but otherwise we will move along in the agenda. Next is the approval of the consent agenda, and we have board minutes, approval of bills, treasurer's report, staffing report, and one donation, which I'll talk about here on our agenda. And I'll just mention the donation. We received a $399 donation from Karen Wenger and Attainment Company for Special Education and Algebra Books, excuse me, and ancillary materials. So thank you very much for that donation. Are there any items that any member of the board would like to pull off the consent agenda for further discussion? Not then, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Is there support? Thank you, Deborah. We have a motion and support. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, say aye or raise your hand. Sorry, I'll get that right. That being all 7 of us, I will not ask for the nays or the abstentions. That is approved 7-0. Next, we'll move on to committee updates, and 2 committees met tonight. We have handbook and personnel, and Larry, I'll turn over to you in just a minute, and then budget. So Larry, and then
Yes,
Travis, so go ahead. Larry.
Handbook and personnel, our topic of discussion was strategic goal number 2, recruit and retain high quality staff and assist all staff as they continually improve and grow. And they just discussed improvement and growth by the district growth plan. So the focus is on the theory of action, and it's to provide staff with a blueprint for improving and growing. And they're assisted through training, providing the necessary training if they need it. And as far as the recruit and retain, our salaries are looked at on a fairly regular basis, plan basis, to compare them with area schools and also using state data for schools our size to see where we are. So we keep our salaries competitive. So that's basically what we discussed. Did you want to add anything, Dr. Thur?
No.
Or- Okay.
Any questions of Larry's committee chair? Otherwise, we'll move next to budget and Travis.
The budget committee met this evening. We had an update on the 21-22 budget, which is later on in the agenda, so. We had a few questions and we'll cover that one later on in the discussion part. And along with that, I attended the TIF meeting update, and there I see there's a spot for that at the end. So I'll save that.
Okay,
Easy.
okay. Thank you, Travis. Next, we'll move into part 5 of our agenda, which is discussion of possible action items. And the first is resolution authorizing a taxable tax and revenue anticipation promissory note for cash flow purposes in an amount not to exceed $2 million. And in case anybody wonders why I'm reading this off, that's for those who look later on video. They'll figure out exactly where we are in the agenda. Dr. Thayer?
Actually, Tammy, you want
Okay,
to
Tammy?
take this over?
So typically it's time of year we do go out to bid for our short-term borrowing, our line of credit. And I sent the bids to Lincoln and Blair's with for State Bank and State Bank of Cross Plains, and all three responded, and as you can see the results, the Lincoln and Blair's is the lowest at 1.94%. And so that is the recommendation, and forward that information to our bond council. And QMB, they created the documents necessary for the board to go ahead and those documents.
Throw one thing in,
You have questions?
maybe for, board members that don't understand why we do it, you want to explain why we
Oh.
do short-term borrowing?
We do short-term borrowing because at some point, because of how our state aid payments are provided to the districts, and also how our property taxes come in to the district as well. The timing is sometimes not necessarily meets our expenses or whatever, so it's necessary to short-term borrow at some point in time. And this is just, our fund balance is high enough where we don't have to really short-term borrow, but it's just a precautionary in case we have to, just because of the cash flow timing of expenses and revenues.
Yeah, so we're just getting authorization for up to 2 million. It doesn't mean we'll actually use the 2 million,
Right,
and we do this for cash flow purposes.
right.
Any questions for Tammy on what's being proposed? And every year I've been on the board, we've done this, and Travis, either you or Larry's our longest tenured member. You've been doing it ever since you were on the board.
Yeah.
So, pretty routine work. Not, then I will look to a motion to approve then the borrowing, short-term borrowing of up to $2 million.
I'll move
Thank you, Travis.
through the bank declares. Recommended.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Larry. We have motion and support. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? If not, then all those who are in favor, please raise your hand. That's all 7 of us. So I won't ask for those opposed or abstentions. It passes unanimously, 7-0. Thank you, board. Next, we'll move on to a series of Neola policies, just like we had at our last board meeting. And last time we handled each one separately. Yeah, but it can be up to the board if you want to approve them as a group, or if you want to go through them separately. We went through and picked out those that needed further discussion. Otherwise, we would vote on them as a group. So are there any of the 14 policies that are on tonight's agenda? Any of those that you'd like to pull out for further discussion? Okay. Then I would entertain a motion then to approve all 14 policies with the proposed changes.
I would like to move as head of the policy committee
Okay.
that we adopt these policies.
Thank you, Deborah. And since Deborah is chair of the committee and the committee is making the motion, a second's not required. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Not, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Once again, 7 votes in favor. I won't ask for the nays or the abstentions. It passes unanimously. Thank you, board. Thank you, committee. I know that's a lot of policies for you to review and for the whole board to review. So, but we do this just for those who are watching right now, or well, Mary Ann would know this, but anybody who watches this later, we do this on an annual basis. Okay, next we will move to resignations. And hires.
No hires.
No hires either. No late ads on either one, okay. Then we will move on to discussion items. Item 7, Roman numeral 7. And the first item is the 3rd Friday count.
Right, so at the last meeting, I had given you a preliminary update on where we were at on the Friday count. These are the final numbers. It did come in close to where we had said before. There were a few less open enrollment out than I had thought the last time. But again, that 4K class definitely is a small class, and so there could be lots of reasons for that. As Bill and I talked about today, because of COVID, there could be people that are holding their kids back this year or just holding them out not to come to 4K. There's a variety of reasons this could be, or it could just be a very small class. But in any case, our enrollment count is down because of that. And then on open enrollment, we're down on the in because we closed 6th grade levels this last year, and then we're slightly up on the out. So between those factors, that's where it landed. But as we get to budget next, we have presented a balanced budget.
The other thing I want to say about 4K is we did not get to do child development days last year.
Oh,
So we did not get the opportunity to recruit, so to speak, or to really bring those families in. So that could be also a contributing factor to low numbers.
I do feel like it's a low year though too, because there aren't many. And is it 41 total students that enrolled in 4K? Because I know they're a weird percentage.
There's 40 kids.
Yes.
Okay, that's been a row. I wasn't sure how that would show up on her.
Yes, no, it's little people, that's the
Okay,
number of little
Right,
people.
okay, because I know that they're a weird, like.
They get
they're-
0.6,
Yeah, perfect, okay.
So as you noted, we'll have a bit of a revenue loss on that, but actions are being taken to ensure that the balance or budget remains balanced. And
exactly.
What were the grade levels that we had to cap? And what is the policy on that again?
Yes, so in January, we have to decide which levels we cap. And in the past, we've had many grade levels that because of being able to multi-age, we have been able to have it at a higher level. Well, because we had to not do multi-age and do cohorts only because of the pandemic, then we ended up with some sections of 3 and some sections of 4. In those sections of 3, we were going over the optimal amount.
That's
So I believe it was 6th grade levels. I know it was kindergarten.
Kindergarten, 1st grade, kindergarten, 1st, 4th, 7th for sure.
And ninth.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's
My class is just huge.
So our hope, now, the other thing is we have to make those decisions in January. And as you may remember, like 7th, closed 7th, but then we decided just before school started to move a 5th grade teacher up to 7th grade. So we actually had room in 7th, but by then you can't change it once your January count goes through.
Okay.
So that created a challenge too, that like that was a grade level we could have had open, but we didn't. And we also noticed when the open enrollment list came in, that often they came as a family. So if there was a 7th grader and maybe a 5th and a 3rd, if that 7th grader didn't get in, the whole family didn't come.
Right.
So there were multiple factors that played into that open enrollment.
And in January, we didn't know how all things were going to turn out.
Right.
No.
Right. Do you anticipate doing multi-age classrooms again when we're able to?
Well, I don't think we'll do, I mean, I'm right now not counting on that at the elementary building for this next year, just because, you know, in the following year, we're changing to a new building. So I don't know that we'll go back to multi-age for 1 year to go back to and reconfigure. So at this point, not for another year, for
Okay.
sure.
But I do think there's some places where we could make those grade levels work.
Yes.
So that we don't have to have them closed.
Yes.
Right.
Like kindergarten was another one.
Yes.
Where we did a switch, was 3rd.
It's, well, so 1st grade was one of them that we
Yeah.
closed, and then
First. Yeah.
and then 3rd grade suggested that they would go to 3 sections in 3rd grade rather than 4 to give 4 sections to K1 in both K and 1. So because we did that,
There's
so
no
we could have
space.
taken one.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
again, it's some of that movement of where's the right place to have, you know, the smaller class sizes and how to make that work. And sometimes in the summer, you get a few move outs or move ins that can shift that.
Exactly.
So our hope is to, get this to The other thing is down the road, we're not gonna have nearly the space issues, or we won't have space issues. And so, that space part of it goes away. Adding a teacher doesn't, but the space issues go away. So then those will be discussions for down the road. Okay. How much to keep them open or not.
Larry,
Yes, I see two totals and I'm not sure
Sure.
which one
Yeah,
is the one we go by. The first one's in the chart, FY pupil count September, it says 894.
Okay.
And then another place it says district totals 965.
yes.
And which one is
So
used for?
965 is the total number of kids sitting in seats in our district. So that's 965.
That's the.
That's the total number of kids sitting in our district that are here. The 894 is the resident district, so that's not including any open enrollment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So 894 is just resident students.
Some reason I did not pick that up.
And the 965, the virtual, so they're not in there?
Virtual, if they are doing our virtual, they're.
Oh, they are, okay.
and I'm gonna ask a question. I don't have a particular concern about our district, but I asked this, I think about a year ago. Just, do we think there are any students that are out there that are not registered at any school that are floating out there? So the city of Chicago, for example, talked about losing track of a number of students. I know we've been much more intentional about maintaining communication with all of the people we think ought to be students here. Do we have any concerns about that at all?
I don't believe we do. I mean, the only thing I can think of is if someone would have moved in from out of state,
And not enrolled.
that's where sometimes they get lost. But within the state, they actually have a student identification number. So even if they go from a district to a district, the old district has to count them for attendance and truancy and all that kind of stuff until they actually get to that new district. So,
Okay.
so
So there are
in state, I'm
systems in-
not worried about, it's the out of state,
Okay.
that there could be a chance. I will say too, enrollments have fluctuated like just way, mostly down, during COVID, and oddly, it's been in regular, public schools, it's also been in private schools. I think a lot of people thought at first that the private schools went up significantly, but I just saw a study on that, and they actually had dropped as well.
Right.
I think there became a large homeschooling population, during COVID, and so there's a lot of different factors, but, enrollments have moved and shifted a lot during COVID, so.
Do you know, did we lose like a lot of families because of our COVID procedures that went to a neighboring district? That wasn't last year?
I don't think there were too many open enrollment out after that. No, when we,
Or even district where they open enrolled to another district? Okay.
I know there were a couple that were planning to homeschool.
And we do have some that are homeschooled. There's something that's, marginally tracked in the state of Wisconsin. I mean, we're supposed to
Well,
register the
yeah, you have to
homeschool
register.
The DPO.
on the DPI site, but then nobody really checks on homeschool students, but, so there are some of those out there, and I do know that we had a couple families that chose to do homeschool.
Okay.
So they fell off our numbers because they didn't open and roll out.
Right.
But we don't get to count them because they're not sitting in seats in our district
Right.
this year.
Doing your curriculum, yeah.
So
Yeah, there's at least 2 families at the elementary level doing that,
with
which is multiple kids.
with
right?
homeschooling though, we do allow them to do some classes.
Yes,
And do up to
there's.
2.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
And
Right
right
now,
now, we're finding that that's not really happening.
That's not
I
happening
think
because they
because
chose to
of
homeschool.
Right.
I mean, at least the
Yeah.
families that chose to homeschool this year that I know
Yeah.
of, chose to homeschool because of COVID
Right.
protocols and things like that.
And that makes sense. So, but just in general, we normally are pretty good about making sure that people who are homeschooling know about classes and opportunities.
Usually that we don't even know they're homeschooled until they call us.
Unless
Unless
we have
something
something,
like-
there's
right,
sometimes where
sometimes,
like,
yeah.
we have one of the students in the district and then there's 2 or 3 being homeschooled and, so then we can, know they're out there.
Or we know about them because they, some of those homeschool families like to take advantage of our summer school programming,
Right, right.
which is great because we get to count them. They are families that live in they're resident families, but, so we had a family this summer that they have seven kids. And 6 of them, one of them's not old enough to come to school yet, but they took advantage of the homeschool, of the summer school opportunity.
Because then they count partially for our Friday counts that way too, if they're taking some classes.
They count
with
for a
us
summer
normal.
school count.
If they would come in for a class, but not for summer school. they
Right,
just-
no, that's a different
Oh,
number, yeah, but I'm
sorry.
just talking during the school year, if they like in a typical year, if they come in for band or art or 2 classes or whatever, then they still would count in our Friday count, so that's at least or partial,
I
or
was gonna
not.
say, Tammy would have to know that.
No, okay, I was curious about that, how that worked. Okay.
So once this pandemic is over, do you envision maybe an increase or
Well, I know those families that are homeschooled right now because of,
that was their?
yeah, that is their reason.
Mhm.
I fully expect them to be back. In fact, the one family emailed me, said, can't wait to come back. We love your kids, we love your teachers, we love being in your school, but they're choosing
Yep.
homeschool because of the
And
pandemic.
that's your choice, yeah.
And there's at least, I think, what I count, 11 or 13 homes staked out in Valtel. So that'll add to our enrollment, no doubt, once those homes are built. I assume there's gonna be kids in those homes before our school year ends, given they're digging in many of those cases, so. And that's just anecdotal and one set, but if a student's going to like them enroll virtual, is that considered an open enrollment?
Yes. Yeah.
So when they go to a charter school
There
somewhere else.
are a couple of families like that in our district who they open enroll to Merrill. Merrill has
Oh, Merrill, right.
yeah, a virtual school. So they were homeschooled and then they decided to do the virtual school, so they opened enrolled.
It's a moving target. That's one thing that's
Yes,
pretty
it
clear.
is.
Any other questions on the school census? We do another one, what,
In January.
January? Couldn't remember the exact date of that. Okay. There are no other questions, then we'll move on to the 2021-2022 budget.
Yeah, so this came to budget committee tonight. We're bringing it forward, but I'll have Tammy just kind of walk through where we're at with the budget. It's not final. It needs to be finalized on the 25th, but tonight is preliminary. The reason we take it both the budget and to the full board tonight is because if there are any concerns or questions, we only have next meeting to get those changes made. It has to be finalized by November 1st. So we're on a tight timeline, yet we still don't have all the information yet. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tammy.
Okay, so in October, the following factors are finally known: the third party count, the summer school count, our state aid, and our equalized property values. And as of today, we know the third party count.
Yeah. Can I interrupt you for a second with the rain on the roof? And you're some distance from the microphone. I suspect people probably can't hear on mine. See, that's rain on the roof.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks,
Do you want
Tammy.
me to
Sorry to
start over,
interrupt you.
or?
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay,
Speak loudly.
okay, so as of today, we know the third Friday count, our summer school count, and our equalized property values, and on Friday, we'll know our state aid count. And once we know that, then the board will be able to adapt the budget and the tax levy. As far as revenue updates, again, general fund, which is Fund 10, property taxes will be adjusted when equalized aid is known on Friday. The open enrollment adjustment reflects a decrease from our initial estimates of revenue of students and revenue counts. Transportation aid that reflects the estimate provided by the GPI. Again, equalization aid will be known on Friday, and then the federal grants were adjusted to reflect the title, a decrease in Title I monies and Title IIA, and then Title IV, our carryovers, and then our corrupt work grants. Fund 27, the increase there is due to additional ARP funding and carryover of our grants from the prior year. And then the interfund transfer increase is due to adjustment of salary and benefits. referendum, Fund 39, again, that will be, property taxes will be adjusted when we know our equalization need. And then food service is just a reallocation of the federal and state revenues to the correct line items. And for expenditures, Fund 10 is basically just adjustment of our salary benefits and account coding according to the DPI. Our CARES funding and our Title I grants, and then our interfund transfer expenditures and our open enrollments. Special ed is just an adjustment of the grant funding again, and then our salary benefits. And then Fund 39 will be determined again when equalization aid is known on Friday. And then community service fund, nothing was budgeted for the annual meeting because I didn't really know if we would have expenditures in the community fund. So we have some there for the portable toilets and then salary benefits of custodial staff for weekend work. And then a tax levy recommendation will be provided to the board on October 25th. So I don't know whether, and then the other documents follow what I have said, and then the revenue worksheet.
So questions? Comments from the board. Travis, you said there was some discussion in the budget committee as well.
Yeah, we just kind of went through and talked about the dates and what the.
Right, yeah, it needs to be mentioned. Agenda. Get it through. And it did come up in the budget meeting, asking whether we were planning at 1163, and the answer is yes. That has been.
Just in case anyone didn't hear, watching this video later, we're planning for the mill rate to stay the same as it has been in the past at least several years.
Yep.
Sorry, we have to compete with the rain.
I know.
I'm actually glad it's
Quite
raining,
loud.
so I'm not gonna complain. We need to recharge the groundwater. Any questions from the board on individual items? Any, again, as Dr. Thayer said, we essentially have until the next board meeting to make adjustments. And so if you think you want an adjustment, this would be the time to at least raise that to the board. Okay. I won't prolong that discussion if I don't need to. All right, thank you. Thank you, Tammy. Next is the intervention report.
Yeah, so that we would like to hold until next time. We weren't able to pull the data. We have to get the, just as a little background. So a week and a half in advance, we have to get the agenda to the paper. And so sometimes there's some timing issues with whether things get done or can get done. This was one, we couldn't quite pull the data. There's not a specific timeline on it, so it's fine.
Can you explain to me what an intervention report would be?
Sure, it'll share what interventions we had last year for students that needed extra support, and then how many students were in those interventions. Thank you.
Any follow-up question, Carrie?
No.
Okay. Then next we will move on to the bowling report, which was in everybody's board packet.
Yeah, so a huge thanks to Dr. Eicher for putting this together. As you'll see, last year had 0 instances of bullying and harassment. Obviously was an extremely strange year, and students were very far apart from each other and in very small classes. So that was advantageous on the bullying and harassment side. Hopefully we can continue those trends, but it'll be much more challenging with all the students back together.
And you're reporting none, and I'm not questioning at all. During the congressional testimony last week on Facebook by the whistleblower, she just talked about how bullying happens online and then it's increasing in frequency, and we're reporting none. But have we had any students in the past that have complained about the bullying online and what
Oh,
effect that's had on them?
Definitely. Yeah. We've investigated
Yeah.
online. Part of the challenge with online, and
Right.
often the police have been involved, is that sometimes it is occurring within the school building. But many other times, and most of the time, it's actually occurring outside of the school building. But there are remnants of it that then come into the school building because of it. And so we deal with it from both ends, but we deal with whatever has happened on the inside, and the police deal with whatever's happened on the outside.
So those virtual numbers are included in this?
Correct. Okay.
And anything that would be on school devices or on their at NGSD account would be filtered through what we would catch through our filter anyway. So they're on a school device or they're on their school account on another device, it would be caught by our filter. Don's really good at keeping track of those for us.
Yeah, and I will say we have a email plugin that catches any tones of emails that might be considered bullying.
Okay.
It's through securely, so that also filters through there. So there's a couple different ways we try to catch it. So
Good to know that. I was pretty sure we had that filtering service for all sorts of reasons, but it catches any attempts at bullying too.
Now, what's the chain of command? Like when something like that happens and it goes to Jennifer and then to the,
No, it goes typically straight from Don to one of the principals for whichever level the student is at.
Okay.
And then from there, they investigate and you can fill in any more. You
Well,
you take it from there.
Yeah, and we, in fact, today, Don sent us, I don't know if you got the message, and sent us, Anthony and I each got a couple emails about 3 o'clock, and by 5 o'clock, parents had been notified.
oh, wow.
And that wasn't
Wasn't
bullying.
bullying.
That wasn't-
Inappropriate technology use.
Yes,
But,
using Google for things that are not school related.
Oh, no.
I mean, that's how fast like Dawn and like they're filtering and seeing it. And it literally happened within hours.
Or not even hours.
Yeah.
Minute.
Yeah.
Cool. Glad I asked. I wonder how that all happened.
Well, so that second bullet point, I think. Kind of
There it
walks
is, yeah.
through
The chain of command.
the,
Does that also include pictures? Don, the filter?
it does. And actually, we just instituted a new filter this year. I'll actually look at YouTube videos, even if there's some inappropriate stuff, it will should blur that out, but it'll continue to play it if it's appropriate language, and then it will kick back in once those pictures.
Any other questions on bullying? Of course, it's great. We have a zero tolerance policy on that. Moving on then to COVID-19 updates.
Yeah, so COVID-19 updates, the numbers have been coming down, which is great news after 2 weeks after homecoming and 3 weeks after Oktoberfest. So didn't quite know what would happen, but today we just turned to yellow for our school district boundaries on the DHS COVID map. So that's good news. That means there've been 2 cases in the last 7 days in our boundary area. Hopefully it stays that way, but for the moment, things are good. And right now we're at the lowest number of quarantines that we've been at all year. So, so we're, again, hopefully it stays that way. But so for right now, we're in good shape. And the testing continues to be a problem. We're trying to work with the vendor, but it is, we sent them an email last week saying, where's the supplies? They turned around and said, oh, can you tell us again what you want? So it's been, you know, still working on it, but it definitely is not. We talked to DHS about switching vendors, but it doesn't sound like that's an easy process either. So I think for now, we're still continuing to try to go down this path. It hasn't been easy, and unfortunately, it's not up and running. But there are places in the community where people can get tested. Rangers and pharmacy, and, you know, so there's places people can get tested in the community, so that's. Otherwise, that's all I have.
Anything about the flu clinic was today, and then anything
Yeah.
about the younger ones, because they did see
Yeah,
that Pfizer
so-
passed it off last week.
Right. So we tentatively have set up, we have 2 dates held with the pharmacy, one at the very end of October and one very early November, to hold the first vaccine clinic for the younger students if it gets approved. So, again, they're holding the dates, and if it doesn't happen by then, we'll just keep, putting a date out a week or whatever it is. But, yes, anxiously awaiting that. And we had, I believe, about 130 students participate in the flu shot clinic today, which
Was that the first time we've done a flu clinic?
we have done it before, but I can't remember.
We did it last year. I know we did it last year because I helped kids come through the door. We just did it right in that vestibule. I know we did it last year.
We had how many?
I think it was around 130 for the flu shot.
Okay, well, on the testing, if it helps to contact Secretary Timberlake, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, yeah, I'll see where we're at tomorrow.
I think DHS is well aware of the problems, but.
Yeah, I know, and I mean, I've heard there's some places it's running quite smooth,
Right.
and then there's other places it's just been continually challenging. From what I'm hearing from my colleagues,
Seems to be vendor specific. so,
I believe you are correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I will make it with that.
Yeah, let me know. Happily talk to folks there.
Okay.
Okay, anything else on COVID-19 updates from the board? Any questions? Not, then we'll move on to referendum updates.
Oh, can I add one more thing on COVID?
Yes.
Sorry. WIA just decided at the end of last week that all athletes need to do the contest screenings again. So they have to fill out these forms saying whether they have any symptoms or if they've been a close contact or if they've had a positive test for COVID. So those are starting today. So
Is
prior to any-
that a paper document or can they actually do it?
we do it online.
Do it online?
We have a Google form.
Don't know how relevant it is, but the Canadian government has an app. You just go on the app for the Canadian government and fill out all the information. And
Nice.
so they have it right at the border at the time you're gonna cross, and it really speeds up
Oh,
your
that's
ability to
awesome.
cross the border. So I thought that was pretty nice that they actually had an app for it.
That's a really good idea.
WIA should come up with.
Yeah, right now it's a Google form.
But it's self-reporting, right?
Yes,
mean,
it is. It is. Right. But that was a change.
Yeah, makes sense with some of the things happening in parts of the state.
Okay, referendum updates.
Yeah, there really isn't much since we last talked. Little bit of conversation with the village. There's another meeting Wednesday this week, so we'll see how that goes. But just continued conversations about the utilities and how to get the utilities there and to get the right utilities so we have the best electrical and so on to run a building that big. So we're continuing to have those conversations. There was another primary school meeting last week. It was kind of fun. They have it in 3D at this point, so they actually walk you through the whole thing. So that was kind of fun for the teachers, I think, to see what it might actually look like as you're walking through the building. So we're making progress and getting to see more and more all the time. And then leadership meeting this week, and usually in the leadership meeting, you get updates on the budget and kind of these or high level, but very important topics. So we'll see where kind of things are landing right now. That's referendum.
And you sent out an update to parents and you and I
Yes.
talked about doing an update to the post messenger.
Yes.
To get everybody else who would get the current updates.
Mhm. Yeah, so we had this, the form, you probably saw the nice one from Bray, sent that out to parents, put it on Facebook, put it on the website, but need to do something more for the larger public. So it also is about time for us to get a newsletter out, so start working on that today, but hope to get that out. Usually, it takes a little time, so it'll probably be November before that gets out. So post messenger and a newsletter, so the whole community is updated.
Any questions on building update. Sounds like things are proceeding smoothly. I keep reading paper after paper on supply chain issues. And so I
Yeah,
still wonder how those are gonna affect us, but
we'll find out.
find out, yeah.
Yeah, I keep wondering too.
not a whole lot we can do about them, but just to keep moving at a good pace and still go towards opening when we planned it. Okay. Last item on the agenda then for tonight is item 7G, tax increment financing meeting update. Travis.
So annually, the Village of New Glarus, they have, well, I'm gonna back up a step. I gave everybody a copy that kind of explains what a TIF, another acronym is. It's the tax incremental financing. It's an option. I'll just read the first one is just kind of a quick overview of it. It allows a municipality to pay for public improvements and other eligible costs within a designated area called the tax incremental district, the TID, using the future taxes collected on the TID's increased property value to repay the cost of the improvements. The rationale behind the TIF is that the public investment will promote private development, jobs, and tax-based growth that would not otherwise occur absent the TID. So currently, the Village of New Glarus has two that are open. The first one is referred to as the Brewery TID. That was opened in 2006. It has a termination date of 2026. Currently, right now, basically what we do at this meeting is just go through the numbers. It's similar to like, the audits that we do of what we do in the school district. So all of the, I guess, the major stakeholders, if you will, are at the meeting. The Village of New Glarus, Roger Trutman was there. Then they have a community member, which was Dave Wittenbach. They have a representative from MATC. I represented the school district, and then Sherry Hawkins for Green County. So basically we go through, they have a financial company that prepares all the documents. So it meets all the state, codes and everything like that. So honestly, it was a pretty quick meeting. We did it virtual through Zoom. We had talked with Jennifer a little bit about it too. The district obviously loses out on the tax base while the TID and the TIDs are in operation. However, at the very end, when they terminate it, then the village and everybody who's the tax and authorities, it benefits them because now that money comes back in. So at 2026, we will see a substantial spike in that because the brewery TIF was very successful. The second one that they have is Backtown. That's more towards Larry's neck of the woods. That goes up, I think, all the way to, let's see, all the way up to like the shooting barn. Enough that whole side. Basically, what that did is came back and encompassed the entire town. So basically, any business in town has access to these funds if they choose to improve their property or whatever development. For those that know the Flannery's, the William Tell, the building there, a developer redid that, turned that into apartments. He took advantage of the second TIF. And that's been going good for him. So just short of that, I shared out the agenda with everybody. So if you have any questions, it's pretty straightforward stuff. So it was a quick meeting.
Do you think the brewery will be retired earlier or will it be 2026?
No, it'll be probably 2026. So, they keep saying, they're anticipating that the second one might see some life, but COVID kind of slowed up a lot of it. So, and that one is to expire in, I believe it was 2042. So that one's got a number of years.
Yeah.
So
Okay. And there are no new proposals for TIF.
No. My guess is, when we were talking 2 years ago, we were like having two open is not uncommon, but for a smaller district in village like us, that it is kind of odd. But the first one again was just successful, so they were like, let that carry over, and then hopefully by the time that that one, matures, then the other one is as healthy. So.
Did you, this may be a little bit out of left field, but did they talk about what the assessed value or estimated market value is of the brewery? Do you have a sense for that?
No, I not at this meeting.
Okay. Be curious as to what the tax potential might be there eventually in 2026. Okay. Any questions? And thanks for representing us on the TIF board. Any questions for Travis on tax increment financing? Okay. Very good. Do we have any future agenda items? We're on item 8 for anyone following online or virtually or later on. Item 8, future agenda items. Once again, if you have something, not necessarily tonight, but before the next meeting, just let me know. Ideally, we'd like to know within the next week because we publish the first agenda out in the paper in about 4 days, 5 days, something like that.
Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday, so sooner than that. So if you have an idea on that, please let us know. Upcoming school board meetings and committee meetings will be October 25th, 2021 and November 15th, 2021. Is there anything to come before the board before we consider going into closed session? Anything for open session? If not, then the board will entertain going into closed session under Wisconsin statute section 19.85 sub 1 sub G to confer with legal counsel for the school board who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the school board, school district with respect to litigation in which it is or likely to become involved. And consistent with past practice, we would need to adopt a motion to go in closed session and do that as a roll call vote.
I'll adopt a motion to go into closed session.
Okay, Carrie moves. Is there support? Okay, Deborah, thank you. We have a motion and support. Any discussion? Not, we'll go to a roll call vote. Larry?
Aye.
Jessica?
Aye.
Travis?
I
Deborah?
Aye.
Corinne?
Aye.
Carrie?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. So the motion to go into closed session passes 7-0. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I don't know if we have any members of the public still on. Doesn't look like we do. We will go into closed session and we'll be, well, we're all here. So as soon as we are done with this and close out this Zoom, we will then not actually get on the other Zoom. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.